Okay. Oh, even 2/3. Very nice. Hey, you.
Hello.
Oh, good. You can hear me. I was worried.
Nope, I can hear you.
How you doing?
Okay. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm here
You
trying
are.
to get my little battle station hooked up so it worked properly. That's always a trial at the beginning.
Yeah. Are you on the hotel Wi-Fi or are you on regular?
The phone is on regular.
Okay.
Does it look okay?
So you're kind of a little chunky.
Well, chunk it on the Wi-Fi. That works, actually.
We got nothing. Nope.
EA. EA.
I hear some grumbling.
That's me being grumbly.
Okay. Well, I heard that.
Okay, let's see if this is working. It may dump me.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Sounds good.
Okay. It may just be us tonight.
You look frozen.
Oh, now you're frozen.
Oh no. There you go.
Hello.
Hello.
We might get there.
Maybe.
Let's just hope. Let's hope we make it.
Oh, you're better now. You're more than 8-bit.
Yay!
You were like made up on little squares a minute ago.
That's made out of Legos. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I can actually see features now.
Aw, hate you.
No,
Hate you
you
so
don't.
much.
No, you don't.
Hate you. Hate you. Oh man, I'm hungry. We are going to have dinner. But what? I don't know.
Hmm. Well, hmm.
I need to look and see what's available.
You're on Patton?
No, I'm on Tunnel Road.
Oh, on Tunnel. There should be
Yeah,
tons of stuff.
but yeah, but it's way in town, so I have to wait till traffic clears out.
Oh, well,
Mm.
you could walk.
I am not walking. You can just no, 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 Ray Ray, bad Ray Ray, bad.
Oh man, you're
And
funny.
killing themselves, killing me. All right, let's
What's
see.
the name of your hotel?
It is the Holiday Inn on East on Tunnel Road. It's out. It's the not the Comfort in Asheville. It is called the Holiday Inn Asheville East Blue Ridge Parkway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that part of Tunnel Road.
I gotcha.
Hello,
Hey,
everybody.
hey, Sue.
Ooh, how are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Making it.
Good.
Trying to find out where I'm going for dinner tonight. I'm working out of town, and I'm trying to decide what I'm doing after the class.
Okay.
Any advice?
Where are you?
I'm in Asheville.
Oh, sorry, I can't help you. I'm in Massachusetts.
I know
That's a
there's
little
no the south.
far for dinner. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to get back before I have to be at work in the morning.
No, I think not.
Are you by Dr. McCoy's office?
Oh no, no, no. Dr. McCoy's way down there in Hendersonville Road. Like I can get
You're
there
north.
within.
You're north.
Is
Okay.
Yeah.
Asheville recovered, Chris?
No, no, ma'am. That's part of my job right now. Um, I am working at the Asheville's big water treatment plant. They get their water from a reservoir, and the reservoir was, I mean, totally inundated and destroyed. The dam is still there, but their water quality is garbage. So I work at a pretreatment facility for that water plant through the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA. So I'm
So
trying to
they're
help
like
them.
they're treating the water before it goes to the treatment plant to try to make it a little easier.
Yeah, for them to work. Like this treatment plant is one of the only two treatment plants in the state that have the kind of filtration that they have.
Right.
And they can't treat the turbidity. So turbidity is like a measure of like cloudiness in the water.
Yeah, I know what it is.
Okay, some people don't, so I didn't
Yeah.
want to assume anything. So their turbidity levels were really, really, really low on a normal day, and now it's probably 20 or 30 times more turbidity than what it used to be. So
Oh,
they're having
geez.
trouble. Yeah, they're having trouble treating it. So Army Corps came out and put up a bunch of pretreatment units, a bunch of dissolved air flotation devices up there, and yeah, so I'm helping run that. Um, but it requires me to be away from home for a little bit during the
Okay.
week. Yeah.
So, Chris, you've been away from home?
Yeah, yeah.
That's why we've missed you, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Before I was working at a water emergency water treatment plant for UNC Asheville, and we
Oh,
and we demobilized that plant. I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Well, maybe 4 weeks ago now. And when I finished demobilizing that place, I went to go work at this other pretreatment plant for the city of Asheville.
So
Is-
you're
is
not
it-
home at all?
He comes home a
I'm
couple of days a week. He was home for like 36 hours and then he had to go back.
yeah.
so you're in a
That might be
motel.
good news and it might not be.
Right. No, this week I think I'm home for 48 hours, so that'll be good. Two whole days.
Yeah. Well, is this the result of the flood damage?
Yes,
No,
sir.
what you're doing is really important. It's
I
almost
think
like being
so.
in the military, Chris.
It is.
Gotta
It's
be
all Army.
done.
It's all Army Corps guys and girls. So they're pretty serious about what's going on. And they're trying to keep everybody straight.
Yeah.
Oh,
As I would say in my best Southern accent, I'm right proud of you.
well, thank you. Oh, and there's Fred. Hey, Fred.
Yeah, hi.
Hi,
Looks like
Fred.
we're
Hi,
gonna have a
Fred.
full house today. Hey,
Where are we, Fred? I'm so confused.
hey. The parsha for this coming Shabbat is called Bo. It's in Exodus, and it starts with chapter 10 in Exodus.
Oh, well, then I'm not so bad. I'm on 9.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And so basically with this parsha, we're kind of finishing up the story of the plagues in Egypt. And we had 7 plagues last week, so we got 3 more to go, with this reading. And so actually the first 20 verses, verses 1 through 20 on chapter 10, that's plague number 8, the locusts. So if someone wants to read that section.
Sure.
Sure.
And the Lord said to Moses, Come into Pharaoh, for I myself have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, so that I may set these signs of mine in his midst, and so that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your son's son how I toyed with Egypt, and my signs that I set upon them, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. And Moses and Aaron with him came into Pharaoh, and they said to him, Thus said the Lord, God of the Hebrews, How long can you refuse to humble yourself before me? Send off my people that they may worship me, for if you refuse to send off my people, look, I am about to bring tomorrow locust in all your territory, and it will cover the eye of the land, and one will not be able to see the land, and it will consume the rest of the remnant left you from the hail, and it will consume every tree you have growing in the field, and they will fill your houses, and the houses of all your servants, and the houses of all of Egypt, the like of which your fathers did not see, nor your fathers' fathers, from the day they were on the soil unto this day. And he turned and went out from Pharaoh's presence. And Pharaoh's servants said to him, How long will this fellow be a snare to us? Send off the men, that they may worship the Lord their God. Do you not yet know that Egypt is lost? And Moses and Aaron with him were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, Go, worship the Lord your God, just who is going? And Moses said, With our lads and with our old men we will go. With our sons and with our daughters, with our sheep, with our cattle, we will go. For it is a festival of the Lord for us. And he said to them, May the Lord be with you, the way I would send you off with your little ones, for evil is before your faces. Not so. Go, pray the men, and worship the Lord, for that is what you seek. And he drove them out from Pharaoh's presence. And the Lord said to Moses, Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that it may come up over the land of Egypt and consume all the grass of the land that the hail left behind. And Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord drove an east wind into the land all that day and all the night. When it was morning, the east wind bore the locust, and the locust went up over all the land of Egypt and settled very heavy over all the territory of Egypt. Before it there had never been locust like it, and after it there never would be. And it covered the eye of the land, and the land went dark. And it consumed all the grass of the land, and every fruit of the tree that the hail had left, and nothing green in tree or in grass of the field was left in all of the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh hastened to call to Moses and Aaron, and he said, I have offended before the Lord your God, and before you. And now forgive, pray, my offense just this time, and entreat the Lord your God that he but take away from me this death. And he went out from Pharaoh's presence and entreated the Lord. And the Lord turned round a very strong west wind, and it bore off the locusts, and thrust it into the sea of reeds. Not a locust remained in all the territory of Egypt. And the Lord toughened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not send the Israelites off.
Yeah. So this was plague number 8. I think actually the key verse in this to me, if you ask the question, why do we have to go through all these horrible plagues? Why couldn't they just peacefully depart? If you look at verse 2, where he says that you may tell in the ears of your son and your son's son what I have wrought upon Egypt and my signs which I have done among them. Really, I think what the point was, at least to me, that they wanted something spectacular, something that people will talk about for centuries afterward. Really, it had to be something that would stick in everybody's mind. Um, and actually, I think they accomplished that because,
Mhm.
I know a lot of Jews where that is really their only connection to Judaism. They don't belong to a congregation. They never go to services. They don't belong to any Jewish organizations or give to any Jewish charities. They don't read any Jewish books. They really have no connection to the Jewishness at all, but they have a Passover Seder. It's the one thing that really seems to be almost the most important observance in Judaism, even more than Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, or that kind of thing. And so, in a sense, he kind of accomplished what he set out to do. He created something that's going to reverberate, in the Jewish consciousness over centuries, really. Um, and also, you have to remember that, as it'll say a little bit later on in this parsha, the period of slavery was 430 years. So for these people that are leaving Egypt, I mean, the patriarchs are just a distant memory. I mean, they're long, long, long gone from that. They've really not had been practicing Judaism for over 4 centuries. And so again, you think you needed something really dramatic to jolt them back in, to their identity as Jews. And I think probably this is the best rationalization you can find for these plagues.
Fred, when
Yeah.
we read through this and we, you reflect on the fact that this is forcing, or this is highlighting the power of monotheism and one God over above all of these other gods that the pharaohs and the rest of the others had, and then to create this kind of havoc. It really drives home the message of how powerful this God is if you don't let go my people.
Yeah.
This is a
And in
pretty,
order,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, no, in order to do that, he had to harden Pharaoh's heart. Because,
Yeah.
if Moses had walked in on day one and said, "Let my people go," and
Yeah.
Pharaoh would say, "You're right. Slavery is wrong. You guys go."
Yeah, that's a
It
great
would not have had the
logical
same
argument.
effect. Yeah. There's a lot of suffering involved in all this, and we actually pay respect to that in the Seder. We take a drop of wine out of a cup when we recite each of the plagues. There was a lot of suffering that was inflicted on really
Yeah.
on innocent Egyptians that had nothing to do with this. But it felt that it was necessary to make this a really the memorable event in
Yes.
Jewish history. Yeah. And even if you read the later prophets, when Isaiah and Jeremiah talk about, the covenant with God, they always go back to the Exodus from Egypt. They don't really mention Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob nearly as much as they mention the Exodus from Egypt. That's the real birth of the nation. And
Hmm.
so, he wanted it to be something really spectacular. Um, then they go on to plague number 9, which was the darkness. That's kind of a shorter one. It's verses 21 through 28. Someone wants to read that.
Then,
Sure.
oh,
Go ahead.
Mhm.
I'll read and then it's your turn, John.
Okay, great.
And the Lord said to Moses, hold out your arm toward the sky, that there may be darkness upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched. And Moses held out his arm toward the sky, and thick darkness descended upon all the land of Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another, and for 3 days no one could get up from where he was, but all the Israelites enjoyed light in their dwelling. Pharaoh then summoned Moses and said, go worship the Lord. Only your flocks and your herds shall be left behind. Even your children may go with you. But Moses said, you yourself must provide us with sacrifices and burnt offerings to offer up to the Lord our God. Our own livestock too shall go along with us. Not a hoof shall remain behind, for we must select from it for the worship of the Lord our God, and we shall not know with what we are going to worship the Lord until we arrive there. But the Lord stiffened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not agree to let them go. Pharaoh said to him, begone from me, take care not to see me again, for the moment you look upon my face, you shall die. And Moses replied, you have spoken rightly. I shall not see your face again.
There's another question that all these plagues bring up that the Bible doesn't answer anywhere is how come a couple of Hebrew slaves get to walk into Pharaoh's palace and not immediately get killed? You don't do that with kings. What empire has there ever been where a couple of slaves could walk into the king's palace, and address him like that? Um, the only one answer some of the rabbis came up was, well, Moses had lived in the palace before, so in a sense he had never really been a Hebrew slave. I mean, he had been raised really as an Egyptian prince, and then when he killed an Egyptian, that he had to leave Egypt for a while. So in a sense, he's really not your typical Hebrew slave, and that really probably would be the only reason, why why he'd be allowed to walk into the palace and talk to Pharaoh in the first place. In fact, if you remember the movie, the Pharaoh at the time was Yul Brynner, but at the time, and Charlton Heston was Moses, but at the time, that they were growing up, there were a number of scenes, where the two of them were arguing with each other. Well, but while with the older Pharaoh Seti, it was Pharaoh, and so when Moses comes back, Ramses recognizes him right away. They were rivals when they were kids. And it's probably this relationship, that allows Moses to talk to Pharaoh in the first place and not even get past the guards at the front door.
You've said before, Fred, that movie was a pretty accurate depiction of how all this should be interpreted. Is that correct?
It was, as I said, Cecil B. DeMille wanted to make sure that no religious group would be offended by anything in the movie. So we got these huge committees of rabbis and ministers and priests and archaeologists together, to vet the script, to make sure that they were in agreement that, that this really reflected the biblical story.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is a pretty accurate depiction of the biblical text. Yeah. And then they go on to, of course, to the last plague, the 10th plague, and that goes over to chapter 11. That really is all of chapter 11. It really talks about this last plague. So if someone wants to read that.
Sure, I'll go ahead. The Lord said to Moses, "Yet one plague more I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward, he will let you go from here. Where he lets you go, he will drive you away completely. Speak now in the hearing of the people that they ask every man of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor for silver and gold jewelry." And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. So Moses said, "Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. For the firstborn of the Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the handmill, and all of the firstborn of the cattle. There shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there has never been, nor ever will be again. But not a dog shall growl against any of the people of Israel, even, excuse me, either man or beast, that you may know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. And all these servants shall come down to me and bow down to me, saying, Get out, you and all your people who follow you. And after that I will go out." And he went out from the Pharaoh in hot anger. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh will not listen to you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt." Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go out of the land.
So, yeah, because one of the objections that's often raised here, why did every firstborn in Egypt had to die? I mean, most of the Egyptians were not really responsible for this, but it basically, the Bible does that. Basically, the punishment is on societies, not in individuals. Even when you get to the prophets, the prophets are saying, if you don't follow God's law, you're going to lose the land. Even, there may some people obviously more righteous than others in Israel, but the covenant is a corporate covenant with all the people. And they look at the Egyptians basically the same way. I mean, obviously, there are individual Egyptians who may not even approve of slavery, or are not responsible for any of this, but they're going to be included. The one thing I could never really understand is what about the animals? And why did the firstborn of all the animals have to die?
Yeah.
Of course, the other thing's a little bit inconsistent because if you look at the previous plague, supposedly after the cattle plague and the hail, there were no cattle left in Egypt. So there really should have been no cattle for their firstborn to die anyway. But this is the one that finally breaks Pharaoh, and now they're ready for the actual Exodus. And then the narrative actually stops. When you get to chapter 11, they stop the narrative, and here they give you the first description of how a Passover is supposed to be celebrated, with chapter 12. And so the next section is really the first 14 verses of chapter 12, which is really the instruction for the first Seder. Is verses 1 through 14 in chapter 12. Someone want to read that? Harold, you haven't read anything. You want to read those verses?
I'll try.
Okay.
Does it start with the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt?
Yeah, it starts with chapter 12, verse 1. Yeah, that's
Okay.
the verse.
This month shall mark for you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first of the months of the year for you. Speak to the whole community of Israel and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household. But if the household is too small for a lamb, let him share one with a neighbor who dwells nearby in proportion to the number of persons. You shall contribute for the lamb according to what each household will eat. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a yearling male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month. And all the assembled congregation of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat it. They shall eat the flesh that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in any way with water, but roasted, head, legs, and entrails over the fire. You shall not leave any of it over until morning. If any of it is left until morning, you shall burn it. This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is a Passover offering to the Lord. For that night I will go through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and I will mete out punishments to all the gods of Egypt. I, the Lord. And the blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be to you one of remembrance. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord throughout the ages. You shall celebrate it as an institution for all time.
So there's a lot of stuff in there that, in those 14 verses. The first real question is, why isn't Passover also our New Year? I mean, the text is really pretty clear on that. It's the first month of the year for you. Why do we say that the year starts with Rosh Hashanah? Because if you look at what the Torah says about Rosh Hashanah, it says the first day of the seventh month. It's kind of weird to have your New Year start in the seventh month, but that's what the rabbis did with it. They kind of ignored the literal text and decided that Rosh Hashanah, the seventh month, was going to start the year, even though, the text here obviously says the opposite. Probably the real reason, though, that we celebrate it when we do is that the Jewish festivals were actually based on the old Canaanite festival. They just took them and reversed it. Passover is celebrated during the time of the barley harvest. That's the first grain harvest in the spring in Israel. And it's really the reason why we have the tradition of counting the omer, because after that spring barley harvest, you brought a offering of barley every day to the temple, and so from Passover until Shavuot, 7 weeks later, every day in the synagogue we remember that by counting the omer. And Shavuot itself really was the wheat harvest. The rabbis reworked it and said, it's when the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, and that's we celebrate it. But it really was the old Canaanite wheat harvest. And then in the fall, when we do Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacle, that was the fall harvest. So the rabbis just took the old Canaanite festivals that everybody was already celebrating it and just gave them a Jewish twist. Just made them it gave them a Jewish purpose. And really, the church did the same thing essentially. Christmas really is the old Roman Saturnalia. The Romans had this big blowout, to celebrate the winter solstice, the feast of Saturn. And since everybody was already celebrating that, and nobody really knew exactly when Jesus was born anyway, they decided to take that, and make it Jesus' birthday. Just as Easter really is the old Greek feast of Dionysus. The god Dionysus dies and is reborn every spring, and they took that over for Easter. So most of the Jewish and Christian festival dates are really just taken, from old pagan holidays, because it was just most convenient to take a time when people are already celebrating stuff and just change the meaning, of what you're celebrating. The other interesting thing is the Paschal lamb. You think that, that if you go to a Seder, we should be serving lamb chops. And every Seder I've ever been to, it's either brisket or chicken, or sometimes it's going to be both. And that's kind of an Ashkenazi tradition. There are a lot of Sephardic families that do actually have lamb for their Seder. And there's one group in Israel, the Samaritans. There's only about 1,000 of them left in the modern state of Israel, but the Samaritans really follow the text here literally. They slaughter a lamb for Passover and roast it and eat it exactly the way way the Torah talks about it here. It's really not clear why the Ashkenazi Jews gave up on lamb. One theory that I've heard about is that the Paschal sacrifice was associated with the temple, and when the temple was destroyed, some of the rabbis decided we shouldn't eat lamb again. And the temple was rebuilt, which is kind of a shame. I'd really rather eat lamb than brisket or chicken, but the Ashkenazi Jews don't do that. Yeah. The other thing, which is kind of interesting, is they're very precise about the fact that the lamb has to be eaten completely. You have to have enough people at your Seder that the lamb will be completely consumed, which really means unless you have a really big family, even the average size lamb will serve a dozen people. That's a lot of meat on a lamb.
Boy.
And so either you have to have a very large family to be able to do this, or you have to invite people over for your Seder. And this has really become a Jewish tradition. Usually most people have a lot of people over for their Seder. You don't usually see just 2 or 3 people having a Seder. And that may be in part, from this detail here. And then, of course, the way they describe it being eaten obviously is not the way we have a Seder. You're supposed to be standing up, with your staff in your hand, with your sandals on your feet, eating it in haste. And of course, the tradition is that we're supposed to eat the Seder leisurely. Actually, the tradition is to recline. And that really came about during the Greco-Roman period, because the nobility in the Greco-Roman world, if free people would eat reclining on couches with their servants bringing them the food. And so the idea was that you should eat the Seder that way. And the reason the rabbis gave for the change is that the first Seder was eaten when we were still slaves in Egypt, getting ready to go out. And you never knew whether Pharaoh would change his mind and harden his heart at the last minute. So you really had to be ready to get up and go on a minute's notice. Whereas now, the Seders after that, we were free men, and we should eat the way free men eat, reclining and eating at leisure. And a lot of Seders, the people in the Seder will actually, if you have armchairs where you can do it, will eat the Seder reclining on a pillow in their chair. That's really the tradition. And then, of course, there should be no leaven in your house for 7 days. And here there's a difference between very Orthodox Ashkenazic Jews and Sephardic Jews. The very ultra Orthodox among the Ashkenazim will not eat lentils or beans or other foods which could possibly ferment a little bit while you're keeping them in your house, which I think is kind of over the top. But the Sephardim, will eat lentils and beans, whereas the ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi Jews will not. And then they go over some of the other instructions, starting on verse 15, and going all the way over into onto verse 28. They go over the other instructions, for the observance of the Seder. So if someone wants to read 15 through 28.
Sure. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the very first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day to the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. You shall celebrate a sacred occasion on the first day, and a sacred occasion on the seventh day. No work at all shall be done on them, only what every person is to eat. That alone may be prepared for you. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout the ages as an institution for all time. In the first month, from the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st month, or 21st day of the month at evening. No leaven shall be found in your houses for 7 days. For whoever eats what is leavened, that person shall be cut off from the community of Israel, whether he is a stranger or a citizen of the country. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your settlements you shall eat unleavened bread. How far am I going, Fred? I'm sorry.
Through verse 28.
Thank you. Moses then summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, go pick out the lambs for your families and slaughter the Passover offering. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and apply some of the blood that is in the basin to the lintel and to the 2 doorposts. None of you shall go outside the door of his house until morning. For when the Lord goes through to smite the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, and the Lord will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter and smite your home. You shall observe this as an institution for all time, for you and for your descendants. And when you enter the land that the Lord will give you, as he has promised, you shall observe this rite. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, because he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians, but saved our houses. The people then bowed low in homage, and the Israelites went and did so, just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did.
This describes the entire Passover holiday, aside just from the Seder, which you do for the entire 7 days. And that's not really the complete description. Later on in the Torah, they describe how the first day of that 7 days and the last day, are both holidays in themselves. And you do no work on those days. And of course, we have services in the shul on those days. So there's really more to it than this part of the narrative describes. One of the things that the rabbis argued about forever is this thing about that anybody who doesn't observe this, who gets caught eating leaven, during Passover, will be cut off from his people. And no one really understands what cut off from his people really means. How are these people punished? There are some of the rabbis believe that they would die prematurely, at the hand of God, not at the hand of man. You didn't execute them, but they would not live out their full lifespan. Others believe that they were, in a sense, excommunicated. They were no longer considered part of the people of Israel. Other people said that they would be cut off, for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of days or weeks. You could not participate in things with the community, and then you were allowed back in. But the truth is, nobody really knows what they mean by that. And as you read through the Torah, there are a number of offenses, usual ritual offenses, not celebrating a holiday properly, that they have this thing that, that soul shall be cut off from his people. And no one really exactly knows what that punishment involves. But the other thing is, clearing your home of all leaven during this time. And many homes, they have this ritual where you leave a few crumbs of bread and sweep them up, and put them in a dish and burn them, sort of as a symbolic thing, which you're getting rid of all the leaven in your house. And then just to be extra sure, as kind of an extra security thing, a lot of congregations have this thing where you actually sell your leaven. Beth Israel has done that a number of times, depending who the rabbi is. But you fill out this form saying that I sell all 11 that may be in my house, to to Congregation Beth Israel. So even if there's 11, that's in your house that you've overlooked, it doesn't belong to you anymore. So people will do that also. Um, and also, it's kind of interesting that it's often interpreted as you can't have anything that's fermented in your house. So in other words, liquor and beer would also be out because they're products of fermentation. But yet you're commanded to drink 4 cups of wine at the
Yeah, I
Seder.
was just gonna,
So yeah, so all fermentation is not out. And apparently it only means fermented grain. You can drink fermented grape juice, in the form of wine. But some of the ultra orthodox are really meticulous about fermentation. They believe if you leave the grain standing for more than a few minutes, mold from the air may fall on it and fermentation may start. And so, like here in Greenville, there's been a custom for years that the Chabad Rebbe will give out what they call Shemura matzah. Shemura means watched. And it's watched in the sense that they really do watch it from the time that the grain is harvested and milled. It's not left standing for a minute unnecessarily. As soon as it comes out of the mill, it's immediately mixed with water and baked. It's not allowed to stand even for an hour or so from the time that it's milled, from the time that it's baked, because a few mold spores may fall on it. There may be a little bit of fermentation may occur naturally, and so every year we always get a Shemura matzah, whoever the Chabad Rebbe happens to be in Greenville at the time. It's the worst matzah in the world. It's just pure cardboard. But to them, that's what you have to do to fulfill the commandment, to make sure that there's no fermentation at all that's going to take place. Okay. And then the kind of the climax of the Exodus story, starts with verse 29. This is when you actually have the death of the firstborn. And this goes from verses 29 through 42. If somebody wants to read those verses.
Sure. And it happened at midnight that the Lord struck down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and every firstborn of the beasts. And Pharaoh rose at night, he and all his servants and all Egypt, and there was a great outcry in Egypt, for there was no household in which there was no dead. And he called to Moses and to Aaron at night and said, Rise, go out from the midst of my people, both you and the Israelites, and go worship the Lord as you have spoken. Both your sheep and your cattle take as you have spoken, and go, and you shall bless me as well. And Egypt bore down on the people to hurry to send them off from the land, for they said, We are all dead men. And the people carried off their dough before it rose, their kneading pans wrapped in their cloaks on their shoulders. And the Israelites had done according to Moses' words. And they had asked of the Egyptians ornaments of silver and ornaments of gold and cloaks. And the Lord had granted the people favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, who lent to them, and they despoiled Egypt. And the Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, some 600,000 men on foot, besides the little ones. And a motley throng also went up with them, and sheep and cattle, very heavy livestock. And they baked the dough that they had brought out of Egypt in rounds of flat bread, for it had not leavened, since they had been driven out of Egypt and could not tarry. And provisions, too, they could not make for themselves. And the settlement of the Israelites which they had settled in Egypt was 430 years. And it happened at the end of 430 years, and it happened on that very day, all the battalions of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night of watch for the Lord for his taking them out of the land of Egypt. This night is the Lord's, a watch for all the Israelites through their generations. And oh, sorry.
Was that verse 42?
Yeah,
No,
that was
no,
42.
yeah. Um, so here finally, no, wait a minute. What verse were you on? I think I lost my place.
42.
Oh, I just finished 42.
Okay, 42. Yeah, obviously now you have the death of the firstborn. One of the interesting things in verse 32, when Pharaoh says, finally tells them, okay, get out. in verse 32, he says, take both your flocks and your herds as you have said and be gone, and bless me also. So in effect, Pharaoh is finally admitting, yes, your God is the true God, and I acknowledge it now. Starting off way back, in the previous parsha, when Moses first confronts him, he says, "Who is Adonai? I don't know Adonai. That I should listen to him." And then finally, after all this, he says, "Okay, make your God is the true God. Have him bless me." It's his final admission. There are a couple of things that are really kind of strange about it, like verse 37. The children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, 600,000 men on foot, excluding the children, which is really kind of a bizarre figure because this is only 600 adult men. If you assume an equal number of women and, who knows how many children, but you're talking about 1.5 million people, which is kind of mind-boggling. It's hard to imagine 1.5 million people, all in this group. And, some of the later rabbis tried to get around that by reinterpreting it. Like the word that's used for 1,000 is elef. It's sheish, 6, mayot, 100, elef, 1,000 people. And so one theory some of the rabbis had that maybe elef has another meaning, like it's really 600 families or 600 clans, something like that. Because that 600,000 number really it's kind of unbelievable. It's really hard to believe.
When you stop and think, though, they were in Egypt for 430 years, and
Yeah,
everybody had large families. I don't know how
yeah,
to do the math, but in
right.
430 years,
Yeah,
that's a large population.
yeah. And the Torah actually confirms it later on because when you get to the book of Numbers, the book of Numbers starts off with Moses taking a census. And basically, you get 600 to 3,000. It reconfirms the same number essentially, 603,000 men. So yeah, that's really the number.
Yeah.
But there's also another interesting thing. If you look at verse 38, which they said a mixed multitude went up with them. And who is this mixed multitude? And the theory that the rabbis had was that, well, the Egypt right now is in a state of chaos, actually, after this event. And so any Egyptian who wanted to get out of town and join the Jews could do that. Anybody, let's say, who was over his head in debt or was under some kind of was an Egyptian slave. Some of the Egyptians may have been slaves to other Egyptians, or any Egyptians, who had been arrested for some crime or something. Any Egyptian who wanted to get out of town for whatever reason could just join the Israelites and get out of Egypt. And we don't know what really happened to this mixed multitude. Did they convert and actually join the Israelites, become Jews? Later during this 40 years in the desert, we don't really know.
Well,
There's
and
actually
did this take place over a vastly larger time frame than the Bible kind of presents when when the sea was parted and all of that? Um,
yeah.
I mean, this could have
Well,
taken years to move that many
um,
people.
yeah, possibly. If you really believe the thing that there are 1.5 million or so people there, yeah, they're going to move very slowly. It's a
They
really
didn't,
almost unmanageable mass of people there. Yeah, it would
yeah.
take time. Yeah. Um,
And I don't know how
uh,
far that is when you look at the distances, but when you get that many people, you can't move that quickly.
yeah,
especially with their animals.
Yeah.
yeah. This is it's massive. That's why really some of the rabbis tried to reinterpret it to get a smaller number, which would really kind of be more realistic. But that seems what it is. There's also an interesting theory. Basically, if you look at the history of those 40 years in the desert, which is whining, complaining, rebelling against Moses, building the golden calf, you know, it's you really wonder why were these people chosen. And one theory some of the rabbis had is it wasn't really the Jews' fault. It was this mixed multitude. It was all these Egyptians that went out with them that were causing all the trouble. Kind of an excuse, lay the
Yeah.
blame on them.
Well,
But that mixed multitude is never mentioned again. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to assume that they were assimilated into Israel.
Yeah, I was going to say they were fully assimilated in 430 years into the Egyptian culture. That's why Moses had the access to the Pharaoh.
Yeah, yeah. So the other interesting thing is that last verse, verse 42, they say a night of watching. Apparently they stayed up all that night. It was a night of watching. And this actually, in Europe in the Middle Ages and even up into the 20th century in Eastern Europe, actually it was a night of watching because that's when most of the pogroms would happen. Because Easter occurs, pretty close or really right on top of Holy Week. And particularly in Russia under the czars, it was very common. That's when all the major pogroms would happen. The Russian Orthodox priests would preach sermons to their people, reminding them of how the Jews killed Jesus and were responsible for his death. They would get their congregations really stirred up. And most of the worst pogroms would really happen usually during Passover, during Holy Week. And so literally, you basically would stay up watching all night because that was really one of the most dangerous parts of the year for Jews.
Fred, one thing
Mhm.
when it mentions it that all the firstborn, and of course it goes through firstborn animals, firstborn this, but the
Mhm.
firstborn in all of those societies at the time, that was really
Mhm.
the chosen person from the Pharaoh or who
Yeah, it
whatever
really
the
was.
family
Yeah.
was. The firstborn was the heir apparent, right?
Hmm.
Oh, if
Yeah,
it was a
That's a
male.
significant. Uh,
it was. Yeah, probably for at least a couple of reasons. One is, this is an age in which fertility is job one. The more kids you can have, the better. And the fact that you had one child, that's kind of a guarantee that you're fertile and you can have more kids. So the birth of the firstborn really was a big deal, for that reason. Also, there was kind of a belief that the father's energy, most of the father's energy, went into making that first child and less went into the kids after that. Jacob says that when he's talking to his sons, when he gives his last words to his sons in the last chapter of Genesis, he talks to Reuben, his firstborn. He says, Reuben, the firstborn. I forget exactly how he puts it, but the maximum of my strength went into you. But the odd thing is, though, for all this harping on the firstborn, which the Bible does over and over again, in the actual history of the Jews, it's never the firstborn. Abraham's firstborn is
David.
Ishmael. Isaac carries on the covenant. Isaac's firstborn is Esau. Jacob carries on the covenant.
Yeah.
Reuben is Jacob's firstborn. He's passed over, and the leadership goes to the fourth son of Jacob, Judah. And then David is the youngest of seven sons.
Youngest of seven, yeah.
Solomon, Solomon is David's fourth son, and it goes on and on that way. So it's kind of odd. The Bible makes this really big deal out of the firstborn, but actually the firstborn is never the one who actually gets to carry on the covenants. It's kind of an odd kind of thing.
But that's why I was mentioning the other societies, Egyptian societies, and all of the different societies at that time. The firstborn was the heir apparent.
It was, yeah. And later on, after Solomon, apparently it was the first, the kings of Judah, if you look at them, apparently it was the firstborn after that. Solomon's firstborn is Rehoboam, and if you follow that down the line, it's always the firstborn of each king after that. So they did get back on track after
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then they go on, starting with verse 43, and they add some more extra rules for the Passover, and that's from just from 43 to 51. It's a short section. Someone wants to read that.
The Lord
Sue, I
said,
think it's your turn. Yeah.
my turn? The
Yeah.
Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is the law of the Passover offering. No foreigner shall eat of it, but any slave a man has brought may eat of it once he has been circumcised. No bound or hired laborer shall eat of it. It shall be eaten in one house, and you shall not take any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break a bone of it. The whole community of Israel shall offer it. If a stranger who dwells with you would offer the Passover to the Lord, all his males must be circumcised, and he must be admitted to offer it. He shall be given then as a citizen of the country. But no uncircumcised person may eat of it. There shall be one law for citizens and one for the strangers who dwells among you. And all the Israelites did so as the law had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. And that very day the Lord freed the Israelites from the land of Egypt, troop by troop.
And so basically what they seem to be saying here is that the basic criteria for conversion to Judaism, at least at that stage of our history, was circumcision. I mean, anyone, once you were circumcised, then you're basically equal to anyone who was native born in Israel. So, so that's sort of the first description of conversion to Judaism, really. Being allowed to eat of the Passover Seder. This is the first time the Torah mentions as somebody outside Israel, becoming part of Israel, and circumcision appears to be the criteria. But then they go on, they start harping on the firstborn again. The parsha finishes up with chapter 13, and it goes from 1 to 16. Somebody wants to read those 16 verses to finish
Sure.
the parsha.
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
The Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me all the firstborn. Whatever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both man and of beast, is mine. The feast of unleavened bread. Then Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand the Lord brought you out from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten today. In the month of Abib, you are going out. And when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to you, to your fathers, to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast of the Lord, to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen with you, and no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory. You shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall be to you as a sign of your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For the strong hand of the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this statute at its appointed time from year to year. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and shall give it to you, you shall set apart to the Lord all that first opens the womb, all the firstborn of your animals that are males shall be the Lord's. Every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, and if you will not redeem it, you shall break its neck. Every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. And when in time to come your sons ask you, what does this mean? You shall say to him, Be a strong hand, by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. For when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of animals. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all the males that first open the womb, but all firstborn of my sons I redeem. It shall be as a mark on your hand or the frontlets between your eyes. For by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt.
Yeah, there are two actual Jewish traditions that derive from this part of the parsha. One is the idea that you have to redeem the firstborn. And actually, many congregations have a tradition. In Hebrew, it's called Pidyon Haben, the redemption of the son. And so, what you do, you bring your firstborn son to someone in the congregation who's a Kohen. And usually, what the custom is that you give a donation to the congregation, and that's how you redeem the son. You make a money gift to the congregation. Although I guess you do have the option of saying, "Here, take the kid," but that may not, not go over as well. But a number of congregations do that as a regular thing. It's usually done during the week of Passover. The other thing, here's the first mention in the Torah about tefillin. This ends up by saying they shall be a sign upon thy hand and for frontlets between thine eyes. This is the first description in the Torah of tefillin. And as supposedly there was a real long debate about this among the Sanhedrin. A lot of the rabbis felt that this should not be read literally. A sign upon your hand and a symbol above your eyes. It really should be read just as a metaphor. You don't literally do that. But the other rabbis felt no, it should be carried out literally. And you should actually have a scroll with some of the law, actually that you actually put upon your hand and upon your forehead. And the guys who wanted a literal interpretation apparently were in the majority, so they won. And so this is why we have to fill in. Of course, the tradition is now that we put them on only when you recite the morning service on weekdays. That's the only time to fill in are used. But apparently, during the Greco-Roman period, the rabbis of the Sanhedrin would actually wear them all day. That was part of their regular routine. While the Sanhedrin was in session, everybody was wearing their tefillin, during the entire day. But this is the first time that it's mentioned. Okay. Anybody have any other comments or questions about what we covered today?
Oh, this has been very good, Fred.
Okay. So we pick up. So the next portion, for the one for next week, we'll pick up with chapter 13.
Okay.
And this
Sounds
is
good.
this, yeah. This goes on, to describe the actual crossing of the sea and the destruction of Pharaoh's army. It's got one of the most famous pieces of biblical poetry in it, which is the song at the sea. The song of triumph after they've crossed the sea.
Fred, I do have a question. It
Yeah.
talks about every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, or if you will not redeem it, shall break its neck. What? That doesn't seem to, that just, how did that get thrown in there?
Yeah, I think the idea is, well, the animal actually you bring as a sacrifice. You can redeem your human firstborn with money, but the firstborn animal you have to bring to the temple as a sacrifice. Now, donkey, is not an animal which you can sacrifice. Is
Right.
not what the Torah calls a clean animal. So you have to substitute a clean animal like a lamb. But if you don't sacrifice it, then you have to kill it. You're not allowed to get any work out of this firstborn if you haven't redeemed it. And so this donkey has to be killed if you're not going to redeem it. But it has to be redeemed by a clean animal that can be sacrificed. And this is the reason for the lamb.
Fred,
Yeah.
do you have any idea what the priests did with all this stuff that was brought to the temple? I mean, there's thousands of people bringing grain and animals to sacrifice. What did the priests do with it?
Well, partly that if you were a priest, you ate well. That's one thing. Really, it's one of the it's one of the perks of being a priest. And there is one theory that the priests actually could sell some of the stuff. That it was too much for them to eat. And the priests actually, in later Israel became a very wealthy caste, and basically a lot of corruption, crept into the whole thing because of that. What you would do, if you wanted to eat meat, is you would bring the animal to the temple. The priest would slaughter the animal, in the prescribed way, and then he would take the visceral organs of the animal, and that's what he actually burned on the altar. And then he would share the meat with the family that brought that brought the animal for sacrifice. There was only one sacrifice that was called a burnt offering, where the entire animal was burned to ashes on the altar. But all the other sacrifices, peace offerings, sin offerings, they're all kind of different offerings, the Torah talks about. With that, the priest actually got to eat the animal together with the family that brought the sacrifice.
That's it.
So it's a pretty good deal to be a priest. Okay.
Okay, see you next week. Oh,
See you guys next
we'll
week.
be in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Good luck,
Okay.
Chris.
Thank you. Appreciate it.